chair the keynote session and host two good friends. One of them is Professor Aman Agarwal, and the other one is Professor Moitza Marz. And in the keynote session, we will be talking about the main theme of the MODAV conference. And as I said, I'm very happy to be part of this conference, and I would like to thank the chair of MODAV and all the organizers for making this possible. Our first speaker in this session is Professor Dr. Aman Agarwal, and he is the director, rector, and professor of finance and dean at Indian Institute of Finance, and he is at the same time executive editor of Finance India. Professor Agarwal has many hats, has participated in many different activities, and he has been enthroned to chair position of the Saint Emilion Brotherhood by the Heritage City of Bordeaux, France in 2007. He has a special honor and privilege given to him as being a world figure in business, arts, and science. He is also honored with Life Fellow Award by Waseda University International Society for Management Engineers, Japan in 2014. He also has an honorary doctorate of finance by University of Cergy Pontoise Terme, France. And he also has an honorary professorship as professor of Uzbekistan by Tashkent State University of Economics, Uzbekistan. And he has contributed greatly to the area of finance and economics. And he is heading as professor of finance and dean and director at Indian Institute of Finance. He is editing the quarterly Refleet Journal of Finance, Finance India, as its executive editor. He is officiating director at IIF Business Schools, and he serves part of the editorial board member and co-editor of many international journals. He is an invited consulting editor again for many international journals, a distinguished visiting researcher, scholar, professor at Australian National University, and board member of many governmental agencies in India, and serves on the doctoral dissertation committees or as an examiner at various universities worldwide. His in-depth analysis and views appear frequently on TV, on radio and newspapers with regards to financial policies, education, capital markets, and economic scenario of the country and the world. And he has also appeared in Turkey in İTÜ TV. He has written in Turkish daily news besides many international journals and different broadcasting channels. His interests are international finance, corporate finance, derivatives, financial development, economic growth, banking, global financial systems. He has published widely, and he has research papers, policy papers already published. And he has organized national and international conferences and chaired technical sessions, presented papers, and participated in over 168 conferences all over the world, including several universities in the US, UK, UAE, Austria, Australia, Azerbaijan. There's a huge list going on, like the whole world. And he is invited member on scientific committees of international conferences, associations, and observer to research projects. And he is also actively involved with the activities of Jyoti Foundation towards collaborations, expansion of educational and charitable activities, and government projects. He is also co-coordinator for eminent lecture series at institutions under foundation. Professor Agarwal has had the honor to deliver guest of honor, chief guest, plenary keynote address at over 146 international government forums, including Italian Parliament, European Parliament, Finland Parliament, Swedish Parliament, Uzbek Parliament, Chinese Ministry of Commerce, Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, international agencies, and over 100 universities. I know that since March, since the pandemic started, he has also organized so many conferences, webinars, and he has been very busy. So I really thank him for sparing the time to take part in our conference and give us his thoughts on the critical issues for the future of accounting. So the floor is yours, Professor Agarwal.
Thank you, Bano, for that intense introduction. I hope I am able to keep up to the expectations which has been raised by your brief introduction. I'll now go to my presentation. I hope you're able to see
Yes.
the presentation. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Bano was very kind. I'd like to thank Bano and all the organizers of the conference to organize. I was impressed by the kind of work which they're doing, and I saw the list of participants and the brief program on the website. You have a full 2 day of deliberations on various issues of accounting. I'm happy that I'll be able to touch on some of them, but the details would be there by my co-colleagues who are going to be presenting in the next 2 days. Bano has been very active and very supportive of almost all my activities, which wherever I have requested her, and I'm very happy to be here at this August gathering of accountants. I've had the honor to address various forums of accountants across the globe, including the UAE, the ICAI, which is the Indian Chartered Accountants Association of India, even in the UK and in Sri Lanka and others in the past. So it's my honor and pleasure to be here addressing the MODAVIC Conference 2020 based out of Turkey, the 17th International Conference. The topic as was there for the conference is very important. I think it is something which all of us are looking at, or what are we looking at going forward. And given the dynamic changes which are taking place around the globe with the pandemic and other things coming in place, we are certainly seeing a huge change which is coming across to us in the next couple of years in almost all streams or all spheres of work atmosphere. This is a work which we are working on, and is going to be on the future of accounting and critical issues. These are my co-authors here, which are going to be there. Before I go forward, I would like to give acknowledgement to some of my colleagues who I have been in connection with and discussing for almost over 25 years now on various issues of my research, including the one which I'm presenting partly here today. I would like to say that the views expressed here are those of mine and not to be reflective of the institutions. Any errors which are and omissions which are there are our own here as well. Now I have divided my presentation in these following components, which is that I give a brief historical perspective, that I talk about the digital influx, which the way it is impacting. Then I go to life with Corona and the other disasters which have been there, give you a brief of what has been there and why we should not be scared of what is lying ahead of us. Then the evolution of life, the government initiatives, and the last, which is the key component again, where I'll focus extensively, is what is next and the challenges before us as the accounting fraternity before the world at large. As I said, I will go with the introduction briefly. The historical perspective, it's interesting that over 7,000 years of the science of accounting has been in existence. We have seen different forms and different shapes of this. Even Chanakya's Arthashastra, he's one of our scholars in India, which wrote a book called Arthashastra. He's also famously known as Kautilya. Way back in 350 BCE, actually has a full 2 sections devoted to accounting. How do you go about accounting for the kingdom, for the civilian, and for the officer at large? So, and it is, as I refer to always, as the first ever book written in economics. So it's not Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, which is actually the first book, but it is Arthashastra, which is written. And in fact, one of the publishers, which is Penguin, has taken it almost over 70 languages across the globe, and you can buy it across the globe any way you like. This book is even valid today, whereas Wealth of Nations is not. As I said, about 2 to 3 sections of this book are purely focused on accounting, because ultimately the way prosperity could grow, the way prosperity could be spread by the kingdom or the king would depend on the kind of revenue generation they had, the kind of reserves they had, and so on and so forth, which was purely an accounting function, late to large extent. Then the daughter of accounting and economics, which is finance, function lately, but it was primarily an accounting function for a large part of the period. And even today, for a large number of businesses, people across the globe, it is primarily an accounting function even today. We see the double entry bookkeeping, which was there, which started in the 11th century. So it's not something new which is there. So the kind of current form of accounting which we are seeing has been in existence for a large period of time. But what is important here is the management of money, which was the basis for developing this, and also creating a check mechanism. So money could be managed by anybody who was there, but then creating this check mechanism, developing a mechanism for check mechanism, which is a prime function also of accounting and auditing, as a matter of fact. I go to the recent Nobel Foundation functions. And before I do that, I would like to bring forth to you the model which I have been proposing for almost now, almost 17, 18 years on various platforms. I've addressed about 6 parliaments: the Italian parliament, the Uzbek parliament, the Nordic, the Finnish parliament, and a couple of others. And in most of my presentations for the last 17, 18 years, I have been talking about this framework, and I'm happy that some of the work which the Nobel Prize has been giving awards to in the last 3-4 years contains and revolves around this. And the model which we have been proposing it is that the technology, environment, and human capital are 3 components which need to be intertwined, worked towards making sustainable development. And what binds them, if you want to really look at, is getting employment and growth for the well-being. But what binds them is actually accounting and finance. How can we account for it? How can we develop it? And how can we grow it? So accounting and finance do follow a framework which is parallel in nature. In India, most departments even today are called the Departments of Accounting and Finance, as against Department of Accounting separately from Department of Finance separately. Even today, a large number of them are called the Department of Accounting and Finance, because one component looks at managing it, storing it, containing it, and the other component looks at how could you build upon and grow it further. Now, this is where the importance of accounting and finance, in my perspective, comes in terms of linking these basic resources, the fundamental resources like technology, environment, or ecology, and human capital, to build about that sustainable development through employment, growth, and well-being, is with this support. It's like the blood cycle of a human body is the way accounting and finance works, and the way the heart is able to capture and pump out the necessary liquidity which is required for the function, for all of them to build in and create this sustainable development. If you really look at the 2020 Nobel Prize, which has been given out, again, I would say, although they don't have a Nobel Prize in accounting, and many of my colleagues from accounting sphere are not happy about this particular fact, but in any case, I am happy to say that the current Nobel Prize, which has been given out, is for the improvement to auction theory, the invention of new auction formats. Now, if you know, as accountants, you would know, and you must have been working on various platforms or various organizations, whether it is a domestic organization or an international MNC organization or a transnational corporation, many of them require this particular function of auctioning, of realizing the real kind of value, whether it is a question of realization of NPAs, or it's a question of mergers and acquisitions, or any other framework. Accountants are the ones who actually end up doing 99% of this work around the world, including the United States of America, where it's a combination of lawyers and accountants who work in hand in terms of getting some of these frameworks up, because there it's a legal framework and the accounting framework which comes in. In fact, when I was studying at Columbia, I met large number of MBA graduates from different parts who have been working across. They said, oh, MBAs are only required to bring in business, but the whole hardcore business is done by accountants and the lawyers in the US firms, in terms of whether it is M&As or valuation or other accounting functions. So I would say this particular Nobel Prize, which has been given out this year, actually does have, which it talks about accounting, money, which is a common value, the knowledge, and human well-being, which is the society at large. So ultimately, you're trying to realize the best value coming out, and that's what most accountants across the globe do, is to give the best value. Now, maybe there are threats of takeover, then they want to undervalue and they give again the best value there. What methods are to be used are what accountants or people like us end up doing. Prior to this, we got the Nobel Prize in 2019, which was for the experimental approach in alleviating global poverty. Now, when we talked about global poverty, it's an ill which has been going on for almost 100 years now. You know, various organizations, whether it is United Nations or other international agencies, talk about it, give a lot of funding, but still we have not been able to resolve this particular problem. Fortunately, the World Poverty Clock says India, which was one of the highest poverty zones, has actually come down. And if the rate of poverty eradication goes on within a span of about 2 to 3 years, we'll have almost we are currently about 3 or 4% of abject poverty in India, according to the World Poverty Clock, which is the online live clock, which actually tracks poverty around the world. Now, here, these three Nobel laureates brought in forward a mechanism to actually not only bring out people, they said you need to give them medication, you need to give them a better health care, and then they will look at better education. But the whole framework of their experimental approach was again accountability. You know, looking at how do we actually go about ending results. One step, second, third stage, fourth stage, developing the human capital. But what important factor here was, again, was accountability. Taking that step forward, stepping back like a staircase, moving up, then flattening again and taking step next forward. This is where their experimental approach also looks at that framework. Now, if you go back to the Nobel Prize, which got in 2018, which again actually talked about integrating climate, technological innovation, and the long-run economic growth. Now, what they talk about is that we need to integrate these frameworks. And when we look at an economic growth, when we study, most of us, even accounting, when we're studying, have actually had basic economics when we have studied our bachelors and all. And you would remember there's a long-run economic growth and there are short-term curves which are made. Again, all those short-term curves add up to the long-run economic growth. And again, if you're not able to account for, if you're not able to structure them up very well, if you're not able to disseminate that knowledge, we are not going to have the well-being. And this again clubs into the basic framework which is there. This is not purely accounting, but then when you look at the long-run economic growth, what they're talking about in their work is actually nothing else but again inducing that accountability factor within the framework. So I thought I must discuss these three Nobel laureates which have got the Nobel Prize in the last 3 years in particular. Some model which we have been proposing for almost last 20 years now is about financial development, where we need to be, it has to be a function of both inflation and saving, and it cannot be one. Most monetary policies, banks, financial institutions look at one function. Even many times as an accountant, we look at one function, but as an entrepreneur, they look at various facets of, and that's where the mix between accounting and finance comes in handy, because accounting looks at a particular stream in finance, whereas finance builds on that accounting basic. So the accounting information is the basis for all, whether you're looking at inflation, whether you're looking at saving, whether you're looking at government framework, or even distribution of funds or bonds. So this is something which we propose. There are some of the works, as I said, which are important, which we have studied and based most of our works on, which I began with the Chanakya's Kautilya's 4th century BCE work, which is very important. It is publicly available. I would suggest who have interest may want to consider looking at it. I always present that as a gift to whoever visits me at this institute. To any foreigner who comes to me, visit us, I present that as a token of visit for my side, my personal side, not from the institution, from my own person. So I bought these books to present because something in literature which I have always valued. Now I go to the next segment, which is on the future of accounting, a digital influx, which is there. And I focus on the following components in this framework, which is on externalities, the global environment, evolution of life in digital space, and the government initiatives which have taken place in this framework. If we really look at the way the world is moving, we are seeing a lot of global disequilibrium, which is happening, interdependence, growth and unemployment and labor concerns are there. Establishing balance between need of survival, social economic growth, and environmental disciplines is required. Now, for all these frameworks, a very strong accounting basis is required. We cannot talk about growth and unemployment or labor if we do not have the requisite amount of accounting information or data, because ultimately, when we look at unemployment or disguised employment also, what is that revenue? It comes out from the accounting information, whether it is a personal, individual accounting information or government accounting information. Now, in India, we have a parallel economy, which is as strong as a normal economy. What does that mean? So if we are growing at a rate of about, let us say 7%, which was projected for last year, that means effectively we are growing at a rate of about almost about 12 or 13% effectively, because large part of it is not accounted for. Now, this is where government of India and various other governments in developing regions around the world, including Asia, Central Asia, other parts of the world, where large chunk of the money never gets accounted for, are concerned because their growth factors cannot be calibrated. Their figures about unemployment do not get calibrated. Labor employability does not get calibrated because of that accounting information missing. And fortunately for that purpose, the government of India has introduced some of these steps like the Jan Dhan account, the demonetization, which was introduced about 4 years back, 2016, which was introduced. Now, this is where they're trying to formalize the whole economic framework to bring in accountability and have the accounting framework in place. They even relax the norm of people earning 500,000 rupees, not to, even if they can file the return, no taxes to be paid by them if they have this income, whether it includes women or men or children. Anyone who has 500,000 rupees as an income on an annual basis can file return, is to bring that accountability into the system. Once they are in the system, then they can actually regulate or bring in discipline in the society. And this is where we're looking at strengthening financial markets, focusing on building sustainable future, central banking and market responses. Many central banks, I know, I've met many governors of central banks, and they're perplexed with this problem. And the problem is that they don't get appropriate accounting data. Even for China, as a matter of fact, a lot of people do not believe in their data. And many of my colleagues from across the globe, when they're trying to do research, are not clear about the data, is because that accounting framework is not strengthened and the responsive structure is not there. Digital revolution, I will be discussing in a few moments. In any case, the most important thing which is being worked upon, not only in India, but various other countries where I have consulted, including Vietnam and others, is about simplification of accounting, tax systems, and lowering of taxes going forward. Now, these are something just to give you an idea about, I'll just spend a few seconds on this, is about the way digital influx has moved into our framework. We look at access. 45% of the world population has access to internet. 25% of the poorest of the world have mobile phones today. Access to digital technology has reduced the cost of remittances, movement of funds, doing business, work, women participation and enhanced, because now they can be sitting at home and doing, whether it is service function or even manufacturing or production of goods and services, can be done by women sitting at home across the globe and servicing them, which was not possible. And this is the digital influx. Now, this is where the need for accounting comes in, because, you know, when you are small, when you're just beginning, you may not feel the need of it, and you can do the single entry system and manage your work. But if you want to grow big, and many of us want to grow big, and especially women today and girls, young girls who are getting into the business sphere want to grow big. If they want to grow big, they have no way but to look at accounting as a framework, to an accountants to be helping them getting it up and building it up from one step to the other. Extremely poor have been, disabled have gone benefited. Financial inclusion, as I said, Jan Dhan accounts, 34,000, that is 340 million accounts are opened in a span of about 6 months in this country of people who had no accounts at all. Now imagine that has flushed in, and now they can think about growing themselves, building, and when they grow, they will naturally need people who are accountants, improving business environment and so on and so forth, less cash economic frameworks. The very important fact, which news recently came yesterday only, which was astonishing to my news, was that we have the authority called the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, which is the parallel of CPA in the US or in the UK and so on and so forth, which is one which has reduced. They are saying that we are ready to take even students at the age of in the 10th class coming in. Now, this is because of the digital influx. Now, a student who is studying in the 10th class, he is roughly about 15 or 16 years of age. Now, he cannot possibly come and do, and physically, he cannot be even liable because he is not 18 years of age. Now, they have reduced it to bring in that accountability, because it's important that they understand what is accounting, what is debit and credit, what is the structure, how does the accounting equation of assets and liabilities works, and so that they can be more responsive and more ethically oriented citizens for the country tomorrow. And this is something that is a big step which is being taken in India, where they're even trying to induce our 10th class students to go forward and enrolling for chartered accountancy programs, which makes them a CA within, and reduce the time by 6 months as a regular course, which will take in their course. This is just basic inflection. Again, I do not want to deliberate on them. It talks about the inclusion of the digital transformation in our daily lives, how it has changed over time. And this is where it's important for all of us to embrace this with a welcoming hand, that can then get worried about it. Now, the governments are talking about a lot of initiatives which need to be there. They're actually digitalizing framework. They're trying to make transparency, even taxation frameworks in India. Last year, a colleague of mine who has been on this committee in the government of India has been talking about how to not only simplify accounting, but in the taxation system to be made transparent and completely digital compliant. So a person filing the return, even processing of that return, no one knows where it gets processed. It's automatically done. There is a human intervention. There are people who are looking at it, but there is a human social connect which needs to be created, and transparency needs to come in so that people can be more law-abiding and accounting-abiding citizens. When we look at life with Corona, now this has changed life, but you'll be surprised, my dear friends, for accountants, there has been almost no difference, except for the fact that they got more time for filing their returns in most countries. Because most of the accounting firms had already gone on a digital platform partially, where they were getting data in the Excel format, putting it in data and structures, and actually putting it in the frameworks which had government compliances and all. Like in India, we introduced GST way back in 2017. So every firm, even small micro firm who has a GST, has to upload that data on a bi-weekly basis or a monthly basis, depending on their turnovers. And as a result, large part of their data was already on the electronic platform. Most of the MNCs and small firms who have businesses across the country or across the globe, they actually are calibrating those Excel sheets. And then these softwares, like in India, we have Tally and various other accounting softwares which are there, which actually are now enabling interlocking between different platforms so that they can actually, whether it is to be GLAP compliant or others, those chartered accountant firms can actually go about. Most of the chartered accountants I spoke to in the last 2 weeks in specific, trying to understand what happened to their work, what happened to their business. And they said their business was going on. They had no repercussions, except for the fact that they could not visit physically the client, but they could do it virtually. So they could be a manager who would actually take a camera around if they wanted to do a physical inspection of a book as well, and actually physically verify it, even get it scanned copies, which makes their mandate even stronger. Again, I will not be given the time frame of the 30 minutes which was given to me by Bano. I would like to contain myself to the other components which I have later, but I would like to touch upon 2 or 3 components briefly here and not go on the others. My dear friends, pandemic, no pandemic, epidemic, whatever it may be called, disaster, man-made disasters like World War, we have been studying them for quite some time. And you'll be surprised, these are some of the main pandemics or epidemics which have happened 3000 BCE. Some of them, the governments of those regions or those kingdoms said it is the end of world. We are still existing, we are still communicating, we are still teaching, we are still eating. Look at them, one after the other. Every 100 years we have had many of them which have been there, which have been actually causing pandemics like AIDS, still not disappeared. H1N1 swine flu, still not disappeared. West African Ebola, still not disappeared. Zikaira, still present, which is there. Corona, which has started. Has anything happened? Nothing has happened. We coexist. We are working. Markets are moving. 2 businesses in my fact, apart from 2, I would say a couple of businesses have been going on continuously for the last 1 year. Accounting business, auditing business, as I say, or accounting business. When you look at capital markets, they have been going on. No sluggishness. Everybody has been in fact, more participation because people had more time not going to businesses, offices. They started. Many of them I know from small business entrepreneurs have actually started moving on to the stock exchange and started doing business. Pharmaceuticals business, hospitals business, healthcare business. And I would say some of the others will also, agriculture, because that had been feeder industry, supply chain management systems, services industry, education. Everyone has gone on an electronic platform teaching people across the globe. So there are a large number of business profiles. So I don't see this as a threat. I see this as an opportunity, but does bring some certain challenges, which I will be talking about in a few moments. When we talk of evolution of life, I've had these experts from all across the globe. I've had Banu also in this to talk about, where we are discussing about people from different parts of the world who had come on talking about essence of life and growth. And what were my key findings of this was that they said all of them, actually, some of them others, from their work-life experiences talked about the fact that we need to build in positivity. We need to build in happiness, kindness, helping others, soul consciousness, spirituality, meditation, yoga, building productive habits and time schedules. Again, that's in accounting in terms of time schedules which we had, which were completely devastated in the previous time because we were running after something which we did not know what we were running after. And this pandemic has given us that break to reassess, rethink, and relook at what is our life. Accounting our own time schedules is very important there. Health and real wealth, reducing digital influx and work stresses, work-life balances, especially for women, families as a family structures. And very important, couple of them who had come from accounting and defense backgrounds had balancing the flow of money for sustenance. The ABC analysis, which is taught in accounting extensively, we try to prioritize what is to be there. An accounting framework which needs to be developed. Now, when we look at government initiatives, governments, as I said, are perplexed with large number of problems, including accounting. Because ultimately, if more people come in the net, come in the framework, they have more revenue to go and do services and servicing the society. If they don't, then they do not have the sufficient group of people to go about servicing. I would not go because when I tried to create a framework for this, there were so many initiatives of different governments and I didn't want to give priority. So I thought I'll just leave it to this in this frame. I go to the final and the key component which we want to discuss today also is the critical issues in the future of accounting, which is, in my opinion, going global versus local. They are these two terms. We have had globalization, we have had decentralization, we have had liberalization, we have had a culture of the MNCs which have grown everywhere across the front. We have had the culture of accounting firms developing locally and globally. Then we have had professionals who had global services and local services. It's going to be a new culture. Why? Because today I can give my accounting to a person sitting in Turkey. Today I can give my business, I may be working any part of the world, but my work locally and globally can be done by n number of people across the globe. Wherever I get the best functionality, the best rates, the cost, effectiveness, I will take my business there. Because ultimately, everything is now put into the system. Large part of the accounting frameworks for most firms, whether it is MSME or others, is done, except for the micro firms where they still do manual accounting frameworks, which they are also actually now moving to the electronic form, because if they want loans, if they do not need bank assistance, accountants say we need it on the electronic form. So there is now a shift. There was earlier a resistance for accepting computers, accounting, electronic based accounting systems earlier by a large number of accountants, but today most accountants are embracing them. They have learned their platform, they've learned accounting on that platform, so it's easier for them for the last 20 years to move into that platform instead of maintaining the bookkeeping, the regular bookkeeping or manual account. And this is where global versus local is going to be a key challenge today. Will the accounting firms run the business? It is not going to be this so again, because earlier there is a framework, certainly important, because for large companies, accounting firms, large accounting firms or MNC firms will certainly matter. But for large amount of business, which comes from almost 80-85% of business around the world, which is the MSME business, which is a huge chunk of business, will go local or will go global, depending on my cost effectiveness, what I am able to do. Because all these frameworks, all accounting norms are now there, available on digital platforms. All accounting frameworks are there. And now accounting firms have people who have the competence to do accounting for any kind of a firm sitting across the globe. So it is no longer a framework. So this is something which is going to turn around. The second is these new areas which are actually emerging in the accounting framework. Now, there will be specializations, and people have already started specializing in accounting in these frameworks. And these are new businesses which are going to come up, although they are not special accounting, but they will be accounting needs, special accounting needs for these. One is the forensic accounting, which is picking up huge, whether it is murders, crimes, frauds. Forensic accounting has become a key component in terms of identifying. And there are now electronic and manual tools to actually go about doing. I know many accountants who have actually specialized now in forensic accounting as against general accounting, which they were doing in the past. Ethical accounting is also a very critical area. I personally feel this is something which has actually got diluted over years. Despite the fact that we have gone technologically advanced, we have put everything on computers, we have put everything on a digital platform, on clouds, but the ethical accounting framework has actually mellowed down. because now you can actually use different frameworks, different structures. Oh, I get a benefit in Mauritius, I take my accounting there. I get a benefit in Turkey, I take my accounting there. I get a benefit in Greece, I take my accounting there. I get a benefit in India, I take my accounting there. Now, this is where governments are perplexed with the way the ethical accounting is taking place. And the divide which used to be there before between the ethical in terms of actually taking advantage of the provisions and exploiting the provisions of the accounting framework within a country and worldwide has now increased. And this is where I would say that ethical accounting needs to be taught even more seriously at the accounting firms, not only as a paper, but actually as a very important component if we are going forward, because ultimately all our data, as I said, whether it is financial data, government data, any data is based on that accounting data. And if that accounting data is fudged and is ethically not correct, we will see that problem build up. We have pandemic accounting. It's going to be there because now a large number of countries are giving funds. The governments are giving funds. There are going to be funds given by banks. Banks will have a new framework because there are moratoriums given by central banks to banks, and the governments are given them moratoriums. So there will be a huge amount of people who will be required to actually look at this particular accounting framework to do their balancing, because they don't want to show negativity, which will be rising as a result of NPAs or losses which are rising, or non-functionality of businesses. And if they want to be going concerns, as is the main function and domain of the accounting, they would need to look at how could they work on pandemic accounting. And so people will actually, you will see in the next year or so, like we saw asset liability management accountants coming up after 1990 and even 2000, when large number of firms worldwide, especially in the US, and started crashing up after 97, 98 crisis. We saw pandemic the asset liability management accounting coming up. We will see pandemic accounting coming up in the next year or so. Environmental accounting has been on a run, and there are needs for these accountants, approvals, even regulatory requirements for these audits, environmental audits to take place, which is already there in India, and I believe in large part of the world as well. Startup accounting is also something which is picking up. In India, we have a large number of startups. Banu, I'll take another 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, if that is okay. Yeah, so startup accounting is something which is coming up in a big way, because in India, although we had small scale industries going back to almost 1970s, and when I trace back creation of startups or these new firms, I have traced back history to almost about 10,000 years back in India, where we had these startups coming up. But as a matter of fact, the startup framework within the government recognizing them, giving them due acknowledgement, has started recently. Earlier in 1960s, 70s in India, they were called small scale industries, as they're called in large part of the world. But for the last 20, 25, 30 years now, coming from the United States, they're called startup firms. And these startups have their unique. I have a friend of mine whose daughter has started a business, a business merging fashion and sustainable fashion and creating products. Now she went about doing, and she started spending the money which she earned for her own firm on her personal usage, now which you could not do. So I told her, you should go talk to an accountant. How do you legitimately make it your own firm framework? Because she's in a business. So she could go about. Now this is not manipulation, which I told her. I said, you need to put your accounts in framework. As a startup, you can't think about just getting money and spending it the way you like. There is an accounting terminology. You will have to file returns, and you have to be accountable, not only because you are a person living in the society, but you are responsible to the government and the people at large for the work which you do, because you're earning from the society, from this land. And so you need to be accountable. And this is something which large number of startups do not know or do not think about. This is where grooming of these startups, we would need accountants, chartered accountants, not maybe large CA firms, but accountants who are actually, and even actually professionals like Banu and us, who can actually go about mentoring them, or getting them into that framework, bringing them into the universities and through the incubation centers or others, building them up to develop that framework of being responsible organizations and citizens of a country. Fintech accounting is something which has picked up again. Large number of firms have grown up in fintech framework. And as a result, we see a large fund. And now fintech financing is taking place, like the fintech exchange in Singapore, which was inaugurated by Honorable Prime Minister, also brings in that new challenge. How are we going to do? Because it is not only a question of money being raised. Earlier, there was two simple sources of financing, equity and debt. Large number of chartered accountants rose to the position of a CFO in firms. Not today. Why? Because there is not one source of financing today. You have ECBs, you have raising of funds from other frameworks, you have these special venture funds, you have vulture funds, you have so many kinds of now the fintech exchanges which are there, which is set up in Singapore, where it's a matchmaking between fintech companies and fintech fund providers who can go about mixing their funds. And it is going beyond the regular, capital market exchange, going to a fintech exchange in that platform. Various governments have these platforms where they are going to ready to fund a huge chunk of it. So fintech accounting is becoming important. How do you go about raising these funds? Is now multiple sources available. So fintech accounting is catching up again. The other one which is there is the payments platform and bank accounting. Now we see payment platform like the Google is wanting to become a payment platform everywhere across the globe. We have in India Paytm, we have in India various other, the Bheem UPI, we have Government of India's framework, we have other frameworks which have come in. Payment banks or payment accounting, even the electronic telephone companies like the Airtel in India or the Vodafone is actually offering their payment services, now even holding their accounts. Now Amazon has services where you open up a bank and you keep, they're not a payments bank as of now, but still they are managing your money. So the accounting of some of these funds is critical now, because when these funds get collected, how do you account for them? How do you structure them? They're not regulated by the regular banking norms. They're not regulated by the NBFC norms. What is that which is going to regulate them is still not known, because governments are trying and regulators are trying to fight with each other, trying to see who will regulate them. So they have multiple regulators and no regulator as a matter of fact. And this is where accountants' job comes even more in terms of presenting them value. Valuation accounting has been something which has been in debate for good 30 years now, both from derivatives framework, but otherwise as well. And it's become even more when large number of takeovers, mergers are taking place. What is the fair value? What is acquisition which takes place? If I want to sell my house, what will be the fair value of my house so that I can calculate the capital gain? Would that be acceptable to the income tax authorities in my country or not? Now, these are some things which are very important questions. And ultimately, accountants are the only answer to this particular question. I myself would get back to an accountant when I have such kind of situation and would be ready to pay the fee. So there is a huge demand for this which is growing up, because whenever recessions, whenever downturns, whenever wars or whenever pandemics have happened, we have seen a large chunk of businesses going out of business and large number of businesses growing up because of businesses going out of business. Takeovers, mergers, and so on and so forth take place. And as a result, more accounting work is required at that stage. Multi-language processing in accounting again. We have multinational, which is there, international frameworks like GAPS and others, which have been present. But all accountings have different norms, different structures. Now there are software requirements where you have multi-language processing, which can be done. Intelligent agent accounting, which is also catching up, and I'll spend another 2 minutes on this in the next 3 points, which is on artificial intelligence and big data, which is calibrating. My dear friends, if you think you're going to go out of business, it is not going to be there. You are going to be even more responsible. You're going to have more work now, because not only do you need to check whether the data has been properly crunched, whether the inputs and outputs which you have got is right, but you have to now also be responsible for what has been done by the artificial intelligence or the big data software which you use. And as a result, your accountability, your responsibility goes up. And now your job, instead of crunching those numbers, is to actually analyze those numbers and go beyond bookkeeping. That's where accounting beyond bookkeeping has to be there, where you go about in terms of decision making, which many of the accountants end up doing about 20, 25 years of their life experience when they're working. Then they start working on decision making. But for the first 15, 20 years, they're not generally lost in accounting, auditing, bookkeeping, and the other structures. That is now going to be done by that artificial intelligence big data. You will have to quickly switch to how do you go about decision making, whether it is for startups or MSMEs or even governments. Accounting as an information system is now emerging. And as I pointed out here, machine learning based accounting would be there for fraud detection, which could be there, then forecasting and predictions, and cash flow, inventory, and revenue management, accounting processes, the audits with samplings, which could be there, much faster and more efficient, cancellations, reconciliation, intercompany reconciliation, performance forecasting, MIS, spend optimization, behavioral analysis of payables and receivables, something which large number of people could not be able to do because the data was too large. So behavioral analysis could not be done. Now even behavioral analysis can be done at a click of a button with that data available at it. Now that's what I said. Decision making is something becomes very important. Resource allocation and sprint analysis. Almost my last slide for our presentation for today. which is deep learning, automatic automation, again, is going to be there, where we look at least mean square method, neural network based backing propagations, probabilistic studies, counter propagation networks, self-organizing maps, Hebbian learning, simple combinatorial learning, k-means clustering, adaptive resonance theories, and Hopfield auto association models. The MSME accounting is also something which is a big thing which needs to be looked upon, because MSMEs are flushed. They are going to the formal sector, especially in India. We have been flushed after Jan accounts and others, where MSMEs have been GST framework, which have actually forced large number of MSMEs in India go into the formal structures, real-time inventory accounting, real-time fixed asset management adjustments, visual searches, contract invoicing, compliance, and taxation. For all this, what is required is upskilling and training of accounting professionals to deal with digital influx, to move from traditional to modern advanced accounting structures. And this is something where even accounting professionals who are teachers, who are going into training, their job has actually enhanced, and they have to relearn the whole processes now, because not only they have to give the basics of credit and debit, but and the accounting equation, but also to tell how do I make decision based on that data which is coming to me as raw data. As Bano knows, in finance we have so much of methods and tools which we can use to get that raw data. Just presenting that raw data, many of us do, is not sufficient. Getting in real output, what is socially relevant, what does it mean to the government, what does it mean to a common man like me and Bano and others who are sitting in the audience, and others apart from professionals like accounting and finance professionals. As a result, you need to move, and that's where their job also is going to increase. International accounting norms are going to see a new normal, because they have a challenge of from big 4 or 5 accounting firms to n number of accounting firms which can do business across the globe because of digital platforms today. Cost effectiveness, they will have to cut down their cost. Yes, they can take their patronage of the name and the stamps they give to the certificate as a major component of their cost, but still they will have to reduce it further to make it more competitive, because business will run out of their hand, because now Bano sitting in Turkey can do business for India, from United States or Canada. And despite the fact she's just a professor, she can do, because she's a certified accountant as well. So she can sit there doing, because she has more time. She doesn't need to go to the office. She doesn't need to go about coming back from the office and she meets up some friend and someone who wastes up time in having a cup of coffee. So she has that extra time to now work on, and she has to utilize it. So she says, why don't I do the accounting work also and occupy myself, relearn myself, and make money for my own self and for organizations who I will work for. And lastly, a very important component, which is still ignored large part of the world, at least in India I know, and large part of the other developing world I know, is the government accounting. Government accounting, defense accounting also, which is part of the government accounting, although they segregate them, is a single accounting even today, at least in India and large part of the world. They have still not moved to the double entry system. And that is where, when you have financial budgets, the budget projections done by the minister, it is a whole Herculean task which takes 5-6 months. If double entry system is there, then it will not take that Herculean task of hundreds of people working round the clock for 5 to 6 months to preparing a budget. It's the same figure, but they need to, hundreds of them have to work hard. All that can be done by machines if there's a double entry accounting system, because you know what coming in, what is going out, what is the credit, what is the debit, and you know exactly what your balance sheet looks like, which most governments do not know about it. And as a result, they over-project, although there's a political interest in it, because they want to over-project, and that is where, which it is there, but there's an ease of accounting which they have used, and there's resistance to change, which is a human nature, not to change. But my dear friends, today, if you want to be competitive, if you want to be efficient, if you want to show your GDP numbers going up, if you want to show the numbers progressing, if you want people to be accountable to you, governments have to be accountable as well. And this is where accounting professionals will have more jobs to go forward in the government framework also, when you're going to look forward, going forward. In any case, these are some things which I had, but I'll go to the last slide because I didn't want to spend time on this. I'm set the presentation to Bano and the PDF file to circulate to the rest of you. I'll just go to the last slide, and then I will end my presentation for today. I hope I have been able to keep my time frame within the time limit. If I've crossed, I'm sorry, Bano, for doing so. As you know, we tend to overstep sometimes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Aman. It has been really a great speech. I'm sure the audience has really greatly benefited from it. You gave a lot of food for thought. So Professor Agarwal has talked about the place accounting has in our lives, in economics, in finance. So accounting touches on everything. And he underlined the critical issues as the global versus local, new areas of accounting. He mentioned accounting is not just bookkeeping, but it's for decision making as well. He also mentioned how the digital influx will change accounting, so the need for upskilling and training accounting professionals, how deep learning, automation accounting will change our future, machine learning and accounting as an information system and its importance. He has underlined the ethics and its role in sustainability as well. So he has basically said that accounting is almost everything. We need it as an information system, and what the information we get from it actually determines how we behave in a way. And modern advanced accounting will be a lot different than the traditional accounting as we know it. So what I will ask is, I hope, Aman, you have more time to stay with us, yes, so that we can take the questions at the end of the session. Certainly. For both speakers. So I will just make one announcement in Turkish as well. Değerli katılımcılar, eğer sorularınız varsa Q&A yazan yerden sorularınızı Türkçe veya İngilizce olarak yazabilirsiniz. Ben oradan o soruları alacağım ve ona göre konuşmacılarımıza yönelteceğim bu oturumun sonunda. Now we move on with my other good friend, Mojca from Ljubljana University, Slovenia. She's an professor, Mojca Mars is an associate professor in the academic unit for management and organization at the School of Economics and Business, University of Ljubljana. She also is an associate member of the accounting and auditing academic unit. She teaches undergraduate and postgraduate courses in management accounting and economics of projects. After her undergraduate studies in economics at University of Ljubljana, she won the Bank of Slovenia Prize for Excellence for her undergraduate thesis on characteristics of crises in international finance. She has obtained a master's degree in finance from University of Ljubljana and a PhD degree in economics from University of Siena, Italy in 2009. During her doctoral study program at University of Siena, she was also a visiting PhD student of economics at Nuffield College, Oxford University in the UK. She has served as a member of WIPO expert panel and on economic aspects of intellectual property in countries in transition in 2011. She has worked on many consulting projects for Slovenian companies since 2001. She was also involved in the EU Temple project, a third cycle doctoral program in economics and business, which successfully developed and implemented a doctoral program in economics and business at School of Economics and Business, University of Sarajevo, Bosnia-Herzegovina. So I will not take much more time and leave the floor to Mojca, Professor Mars. Mojca, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Banu. Let me just share my presentation. Could you just please confirm if you can see my slides? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, dear Banu, thanks again for inviting me to your conference and for the nice introduction to your colleagues. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues in Turkey, I'm very honored that I have the opportunity to present and share my thoughts about some of the critical issues in accounting. And since you are all in the accounting boat, I'm sure that you probably share at least some of my views about these critical issues. However, I hope to provide perhaps a new point of view on these issues with my talk today. Instead of focusing on the technical aspects of presenting accounting numbers, I wanted to take another point of view and focus my talk on what do we do actually with the numbers once we have the numbers in front of us. So to start with, it will not be a groundbreaking news for you to see what I have put on my first slide, right? And as accountants, we are sometimes think that, you know, that numbers and accounting is one of the most important, if not the most important thing invented by humankind in history. But it's clear probably also to people outside accounting that throughout history, this tendency to count, quantify, monetize, value almost everything around us was just constantly increasing, right? And with the development of technology like data science and data analytics techniques, this just became easier and easier. So we have more and more types of analysis available, like spatial analysis and text analysis, sentiment analysis even. So as a parallel to that, not only that we have more analysis and data available, we also want to analyze more. So the scope of things we want to measure and monetize increased as well in history. So just think about the triple bottom line initiatives like social accounting, environmental accounting, integrated reporting, even risk management can be portrayed as an attempt, right, to broaden the scope of measuring things around us. The accounting scholars already in the 80s and 90s, such as, for example, the work we can find in the works of Latour, Robson, or Miller, found out and argued that numbers cannot be taken by themselves. So they were arguing that accounting practice, and not just accounting, any calculative practice, has two important components, namely inscriptions and devices. So in this context, the inscriptions are numbers and the devices are the tools, the analytical tools that we use to provide them. So this means that the numbers cannot be just taken alone outside of their context, outside of their models, but they had to be considered as complements, right, as two parts of the same thing. So this naturally explains why simultaneously to having more and more complex data collected, we needed to have also more sophisticated tools, calculative tools, to analyze them. Now I have here just two examples of these complex models. So this one is called the New Analytics Landscape, and the second one I think you will recognize. It shows the logical structure behind the integrated reporting, right? So we are sure that these models, which are more complex, more advanced, in our academic view, of course, they should be better, right? We typically, as academics and as professionals in accounting, argue that more advanced analytical approaches are always better than heuristic, simple ones. So we tend to believe that analytical models are not just necessary for good practice, they are necessary even for good decision making. And we therefore encourage management to give top priority to developing and maintaining such advanced analytical approaches, techniques. But this sometimes leads to a particular style of management, which is called management by numbers, where it is believed that just by following the numbers, right, you will end up with great results. So in this type of management, numbers become you know, like beacons in decision making, really important guidelines, benchmarks, and the models become practically modern oracles, right? Very important things. But there is a however, of course, right? So if we look at social psychology research on numerical processing, numerical cognition by individuals and small groups, we find that individuals and organizations, as an extension of that, have not only different preferences regarding the use of numbers and models for decision making, but also different needs regarding the amount of this type of information and regarding the precision of this information. So the social psychology literature on these kind of questions concludes that the understanding of numbers often deviates already from their objective meaning, right? So to simplify, this means that people tend to simplify numbers, right? So not only when we talk about the objective or subjective value or information that we can extract out of a number, but also in conversation, in communication about numbers, and as an extension, also in inferences that we do based on the numbers. So numbers are really interpreted. They are thought as indicators of reality and not the true reality. Although in those management by numbers style of management, they are represented or touted as the true reality. But we must be careful, right? And that there is, of course, the need to supplement such type of information with non-numerical qualitative information to extract the full meaning of what we want from the number, which is this representation of reality. This trend of research also shown that the importance of number precision also varies among individuals and organizations. So the extent of how we tend to round off the numbers differs as well, right? On the other side, of course, we saw that people tend to simplify the numbers, but they also disregard complex models, right? So here is again perhaps an illustrated funny example, but the psychological research, for example, shows that in their decision making, people tend to only count in the signs of relations between some variables, right? Not the exact amount of effects, right? Or even if they are significant or not significant, as we tend to do in academia. Besides, for example, just gross differences in magnitudes are accounted for in decision making, right? Not the exact ones. So we learned from this research that on one hand, numbers can be interpreted either very idealistically or more pragmatically. And on the other side, similarly with analytical models, we can have very enthusiastic beliefs in those type of analytical techniques or be quite skeptic about them. On the other side, we understand also that this processing of numerical information is very much influenced by individual preferences towards this type of techniques. However, a shared culture regarding the use of numbers and the models develops in small groups, like, for example, management board teams. And because of that, this type of shared culture towards the use and the preferences of numbers and analytical models is called calculative culture. Calculative culture develops based or through shared activities, like, for example, board meetings or preparation of reports or briefings, or everyday communication and discussions that management has with other employees in the company. So it is believed that calculative culture importantly influences organizational performance, because if the management shares these views on how the numbers should be interpreted and how the models should be used, this makes decision-making more efficient, right? If it's aligned among the members of the management team. So with my colleague Daria Pelhan and I researched calculative culture a little bit more in depth, and we came up with this typology of cultures that we can observe in companies based on the two dimensions that I presented a little bit earlier. So regarding the models, you can be more or less enthusiastic, right, about how useful they are for your business, for your decision making. And similarly, regarding the numbers, you can interpret them more or less pragmatically. So as true pictures of reality, or as just vague indicators of what approximately is going on. So when you put these two dimensions together, of course, you end up with 4 different types of combination. And on one side, you have this very enthusiastic culture where analytical models are very appreciated. The numerical outputs, the numbers, are taken at face value, right? They are not doubted. The number itself becomes an important guideline for decision making. And on the other side, you have the opposite, the skeptic culture. And I'm sure everyone among the audience probably knows about some prototypical entrepreneur, right, who doesn't believe the analytical models. He or she doesn't need the numbers to tell him or her what to do, because decision making is based mostly on heuristics, qualitative information, experience, gut feelings, they often tell us. And on the opposite corners, we have somewhat paradoxical cultures. So on the left corner here in the bottom, we have a culture where analytical models are not really appreciated, but nevertheless the data are believed, right? So they do become kind of a management by numbers type of managers, right? You take just the number, but you don't really believe the models behind it. And as an opposite to that, we have a culture called judicious culture, where we admit that there are advantages of using an advanced analytical techniques, but the numerical outputs are interpreted, however, very pragmatically. So we could say we have the technology, the models, because we have to have it, right? But we don't really rely in decision making on the results. So in this type of culture, the use of analytical models is mainly a signal to outsiders, right? Not so much used as a tool for actual decision making going on in the company. Now, regardless of how enthusiastic we are about the models and the numbers, it's remarkable to see that the top problems management faces remain still the same, right? Which is basically how to execute these numerically very carefully elaborated, supported, right? Plans. And because of the overload of numerical information that we have today, it's even more difficult perhaps to pick which ones are the important ones to steer the business. So the main challenge I see in today's world, as I'm sure most of you do as well, is not so much how to collect more and more of these numbers, right? And how to analyze them, but what to do then with them. And since the problems that the managers face are quite complex in their nature, perhaps technology again will save us. Already the other keynote speaker, professor, also mentioned machine learning, artificial intelligence, right? So maybe we can rely again for the technology to solve our problems. Perhaps we can find an analytical approach that is capable of providing us this more holistic, but still technically advanced approach to solving the complex problems that we face today. So such an analytical approach would have to be capable of using high frequency data, for example, taking into account multiple dimensions of some problems. It would certainly be desirable that we are able to use unstructured data, right? Not to be forced to provide already a structure behind the data. So these are problems which are difficult to apprehend, of course, to visualize and even to explain. And that's why machine learning maybe can help us. Perhaps we have reached the limits of human brain and human capabilities regarding this. These type of techniques should be able also to adapt themselves, adapt the models itself to constantly new streams of data that would feed those type of models. Now, I would like to end my speech today with, of course, an important question. So, taking into account all this development, what this means for us, for accountants, right? How will this redefine the role of accounting and accountants? Do we still limit ourselves to measuring or to evaluating costs of things, or we have to find new ways to provide measurements of outputs, outcomes, and true impacts, right? Cost is not always showing us the true nature of the impact. And I started with all these new complex models like integrating reporting and so on. And one common feature to those approaches is often this impact that we would like to measure, right? So moving beyond just costing. This probably means that we will need new data science skills, right? But the question is, do we teach our students also data science skills, or do we outsource this type of skills to other professionals? So should data science be part of new accounting programs, program curriculums or not, right? This, I think it's a true challenge for the profession today. And similarly, should the role of accountants be limited to operational levels, or do we keep our strategic, right, strategic level roles, management control, and so on? So I hope, as I said, that with this brief talk, I was able to open up perhaps a new perspective on these questions. And I thank you again for your kind attention. I'm open up now also for comments from your side and questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mojca. This was also a great speech, showed us another, made us look at accounting from a different window. So Professor Martz has talked about how we use numbers. Just generating them is not enough. We should be able to analyze them, and how the technological advancements basically changed how the numbers are collected, how we analyze them, how we interpret them. And she talked about the holistic analytical approach that the managers should have, and how social psychology actually affects how we interpret these numbers and use them in our decision making. And she also mentioned that redefining the role of accounting and accountants is necessary now with all these developments. And she also asked the question, should we have data science skills taught to our accounting students, or do we outsource them? So we will need to, as academics also, we will need to go over our curriculum and decide what type of skills and competencies that we should try to give to our students for the future of accounting profession and accountants. So I think in that sense, both speakers mainly touched upon the changes, and that this upskilling is needed basically for all accountants and accounting professionals, but we should also be, as academics, preparing our students for this future. So the whole accounting curriculum probably needs to be re-evaluated and updated based on the changes. So thank you very much. It was really great to have two good friends, both of whom I know more than 10 years. I've known Mojca, and 20 years I've known Aman, and both of them, I value their thoughts and their views. And I hope they opened up new windows. Now I will open the floor for questions. So if you have any questions, as I have mentioned before, you can write it from the Q&A part of the Zoom platform. And then I will ask it to our panelists. Sorularınız varsa, ben şimdi sorular için biraz daha zamanımız kaldı. 12:30'a kadar süremiz var. Sorularınızı Q&A yazan yerden yazarsanız, Türkçe veya İngilizce, ben panelistlerimize bunları soracağım. Onun için biraz isterseniz bekleyelim. I will wait for a couple of minutes and then or seconds, and then if there are no questions, we can close the session. Or if you have questions for to each other, I don't know. Okay, so I don't see anything. So I think we need to process, you know, we have all these changes coming on us, so we have to think about them. And thank you very much. Thank you both for accepting our invitation and providing these very fruitful speeches for all of us. Hope to see you in Slovenia, Mojca, soon. And Aman, I hope I will be able to visit you in India. So take care. Thank you very much. Now I leave the floor to Elif. I think she has an announcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Banu, again. And I wish all of the participants in the conference a fruitful work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Banu, for giving this opportunity. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Değerli katılımcılarımız, sabah oturumumuz sona ermiştir. Bu oturumdan çıkabilirsiniz. Bundan sonraki her oturumun şifresi size gönderildiği şekilde farklıdır. Size gönderilen şifrelerle, size gönderilen birinci oturum şifreleriyle saat 13'te Profesör Doktor Aylin Poroy Arsoy Başkanlığında değişim dönemleri ve etkileri konulu oturumumuza katılımınızı bekliyoruz. Saygılarımla.